Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2015 Ford F-350, we're going to be showing you how to install the Firestone Extreme Duty Ride-Rite air helper springs for the rear axle. But before we jump right into that, why don't we just take a minute, check these out, and make sure they're going to work for you. Chances are pretty good if you're here watching this video. You know your suspension could use a little bit of help. You know, even though these trucks are super heavy duty, when you start really loading up a bunch of weight on them, you know, you're still going to run into some, not necessarily problems, but you can find some room for improvement. And that's where an airbag system like this is really going to come into play. You know, when you don't have these on there, you get a bunch of weight in the bed, you know, your truck starts to squat. It doesn't brake as well, just doesn't ride as well, and all those issues, you know. So since you already know what it feels like, what we did, we actually got the bags installed, and I put all this water in here. I think it's 180 gallons, something like that, quite a bit of weight back here. We got about 20 pounds air in the bag, so didn't take a whole lot to kind of level our truck out. Might even put in a few more pounds, and we're gonna drive around and see how this thing feels, see if it you know, is more responsive and everything like that. All right, so we're in the truck. We got all that weight back there, and I didn't even mess with the bags. Like I said, they're about 20 pounds air in them, and we're gonna see what the deal is here. So we'll run through our test course, and we're gonna go over some bumps first, see how it feels. And not bad at all, actually. Usually with airbags, you almost get kind of a stiffer ride in a sense, but you know, I like these heavy duty ones. They're a lot bigger, you know, in general, and that means you don't have to run nearly as much air. So like I said, I had 20 pounds in them. The lighter duty ones, you'd probably have to have about 40, and that in turn kind of makes things a little bit stiffer. So yeah, I mean, it feels like you'd want it to, you know, for sure. A truck's not all over the place. It's not rock solid, but it's also not bottoming out either. So over the bumps at least, I think we're headed in the right direction. Now what we'll do is some evasive maneuvering, so some zigzagging and stuff here. I feel like this is more real world. How often are you going to run over 50 bumps in a row? But it is a good test. But you will make turns every time you drive. So this is usually where bags really shine, in my opinion, you know, in terms of helping with body roll. But we'll go ahead and got a little clearing here. Start picking up some speed. And good, you know, very, very minimal body roll. And that's even with a tank of water back there, which usually kind of sloshes around and throws you around. So the truck feels planted. Like I said, the body roll really isn't there. You know, the truck was going where you want it to go. And so in terms of that, you know, I feel like it definitely made an improvement. And honestly, you know, not only just for a more comfortable ride, it's easier to drive long distances. You know, you're not getting beat up and stressed out. Anything you can do to make you more confident and comfortable when you're towing and pulling a trailer is a no-brainer, at least in my opinion. You know, it adds a whole nother element to driving when you're towing, and so anything you can do to kind of make it a little more simple is definitely worth it, at least in my opinion. So now that we kind of driven around, tested these things out, see how they feel and whatnot, let's take a look at them actually underneath the truck. So once you have them installed, this is what they're going to look like. And essentially, they're just going to fill the void there in between the bottom of your frame rail and the top of your axle tube, and essentially just provide, you know, a big cushion there. And that is going to, these are going to replace your factory jounce bumper, which is just bolted up right here, and it's a little rubber piece. And what that's going to do is just prevent your truck from bottoming out. It's not going to provide any additional support like our airbag will. This is that factory jounce bumper. So big difference there in terms of this and the airbag. So one of the nice things about airbags is the fact that you can kind of fine tune them to your particular liking or trailer load, whatever you're hauling. So, you know, with these being adjustable, you can change the air pressure inside of it. So let's say maybe if you have, you know, a utility trailer or something along them lines, you know, you find that 20 pounds of air, 30 pounds of air is enough for it, you can do that. On the other hand, let's say if you go to hook up a big car hauler, big old camper or something like that, and you need a little bit more to get the ride how you want it, you can just bump up the pressure in them. And, you know, it makes it completely customizable as opposed to some of the other suspension enhancements like timber ends or sumo springs or things like that. You kind of get what you get. The benefit to those is they're not going to really require any maintenance. You put those on and you're done, but you sacrifice that adjustability. So it really just depends what you're going to be doing with your truck. You know, if you're someone who's out there, you know, a handful of the weekends out of the year, camping or whatever, might be a better option for you. If you're someone who, you know, tows a lot, maybe you're into the construction business or something like that, constantly towing different loads, the airbag is really going to shine there, having that adjustability. But with that said, these are going to require a little bit of maintenance. You know, you're going to have to keep at minimum 5 pounds of air in them at all times, or else the bag could get damaged. You know, eventually you're probably going to end up with a leak. You know, I'm not going to lie to you. It's just kind of the nature of these. So it's something you'll have to kind of keep an eye on as well. But with that said, there are things that make that maintenance a little bit easier. You can always get a compressor. I like the Airlift Easy compressor system. It's got a wireless remote. I had a lot of good luck with those, but essentially that'll eliminate a lot of your maintenance. You know, you can preset it for 5 PSI. Every time you turn the key in a truck, that's what it'll put it at, or however you want to set it up. And you can make those adjustments on the fly too. You know, you don't actually have to come back and get an air hose and fill the bags up manually. These are going to be the heavy duty type airbags. So they're the big dogs. You know, they're a lot larger in capacity and size. And so they're going to have a 7,500 pound weight carrying capacity. That's just what the bags can handle. It's not going to increase your truck's load carrying capacity. And you can adjust these all the way up to 150 PSI, which is that's quite a bit of air pressure. You'll probably never need to go that high, but you know, the option is there for you. And I've noticed too in the past, you know, the smaller size airbags, a lot of the others are rated for 5,000 pounds. Those you'll have to crank up more for the same size load. So let's say if you had a camper, you know, pretty heavy camper, with those, you know, generally speaking, you might have to put 50 or 60 pounds air in them. With these, usually it's about half that or quite a bit less. And what that's going to do overall, since the bag's not so, you know, hard from having all that pressure in it, it's going to make the ride a little bit smoother, you know, because you're not going to have a super hard airbag back here. This will be able to get the same job done with less pressure inside of it. Other than that, at the end of the day, you know, if you're someone that does a lot of towing, a lot of different trailers, or just want that ultimate adjustability, you know, kit you really can't go wrong with. Firestone makes good stuff in terms of that. They've been around for a long time. As far as getting these installed, not the easiest nor the hardest that I've ever done. Kind of a little tedious at times, I guess you could say, because you do got several brackets. You got to kind of piece everything together. But you know, it's one of them things. You get through it, do it once, do it right, and you know, you're not going to have to worry about it again. But if you'd like to see how it's done, feel free to follow along. We'll go ahead and put them all together now. To begin our installation, we're going to be underneath the back of our truck, and I just temporarily lowered and removed our spare tire. Gives us a lot more room to work. It will go back up at the end here. And what I'm going to do now is remove our heat shield for the spare tire. So there's 4 bolts, 2 here, and then 2 just on this back side. And they're going to be a 13 millimeter. I'm going to grab our socket and get them pulled out. Let's get all of them off. able to slide this out of the way and set it to the side. Now what we can do is remove our factory John's bumper, which is this piece here. So there's going to be one nut holding it on. It's on the top side. It's a 15 millimeter. And so I'm going to grab my ratcheting type wrench here, just to speed things up, and get that nut removed. And once that happens, you should be able to kind of drop the John's bumper down and get it out of the way. Put the nut off, this will drop down and we can remove it, as we will not be reinstalling it. Now we could take our upper bracket and mount this up. So there's a factory hole in the frame right there, and this is going to line up with it. So you can use the longer bolt that they give you. Now since we have a gooseneck hitch on here, the side plate is on the outside part of the frame, so our bolt can't completely pass through. So I just had some washers here that I just kind of stacked up to shorten the length of the bolt, essentially. And I'm going to take that and push it through the frame there. Here's where our bolt went through to the outside of the frame. And if you don't have a big side plate there for a hitch, you want to put on a flat washer and then an nylon lock nut. In our case, there's just no space to get another flat washer up there, so I did what you had to do. I got that nylon lock nut started hand tight. Now what you can do is take your spacer blocks or shims and fill the gap here between the bottom of our frame and our upper bracket. Sometimes you can use 2 of the thick ones. In our case, just how everything's setting, I got a thick one and a thin one. Just use the ones that fit the best. You know, you want them to fit snug in there, so that you're going to line up the holes in that with the holes in your, or with the hole in the lower bracket there. It's kind of a beveled edge hole. And then this bolt is going to run up, and that's going to go through the hole where our John's bumper was bolted up into the frame. So get everything as close as we can. Line it up and push it up through our frame there. So where that bolt comes up, you're then going to take one of the thicker flat washers, slide that over the bolt there, then take a nylon lock nut and get it started hand tight. And when you're doing all this, make sure you're not pinching any of these wires or anything. I know there's a lot going on over here, so just keep that in mind. You don't want to go to tighten all this stuff down and realize you smashed a wire or anything. With that hardware in place and tight, now we can come back with a 9/16 size socket and wrench and snug it all down. Once that top one's snug, then come back with a 7/32 size Allen key, a 9/16 wrench, and tighten this bolt down. Now we need to make sure and come back with a torque wrench and tighten down both of the bolts to the amount specified either in the instructions, or sometimes that information's located on the top of one of the airbags. Now we're able to grab our air spring, and on the top of it we're going to have a threaded portion here and then a dowel pin little piece there. And if you look at our bracket, it's going to be several sets of holes here, these two and then these two. So with this one, the threaded one, you want it to go up through that hole. I guess you call it the back hole, closest to the outside of the frame. And then this dowel pin, you want that to slide into the front hole there. So, and this is really important. It's critical that goes in there, because if not, you know, the bag can shift and bad things can happen. So we'll go ahead. What I like to do is just kind of get that started, and then we're able to kind of just sneak it around and slide it up, and you'll feel it kind of lock into place there. And then where the threaded portion goes to your upper bracket, you're going to take a star washer deal, put that on, and then the large nut will thread onto the bag. And I'm just going to get this started as tight as I can by hand here. We can tighten and torque that large nut down. So I have an 1.1 socket, and we'll run it down to the amount specified there. Now you can take your air fitting, and you can see there's some thread sealer stuff on the threads. It's red in color. This is going to thread into the top of the airbag there where that piece comes up. And if I can manage to get it lined up here, get that started hand tight, and then come back with a 9/16, and we're just going to snug this down. Usually it's only a few turns. You want that thread sealer to be engaged and everything to be snug. You don't want to crank down on these by any means, because being brass, they're easy to crack. And my thought is, you know, if it leaks when we're done, not that big of a deal. We can always come back and give it a couple more turns. If we break it, well, then it turns into kind of a big headache. So just get it pretty snug and call it good. I'm going to take our two other brackets here and loosely assemble them. So eventually this will sit on our axle tube, right? And this will go on top of it like so. And these grooves, what you're going to do is take these bolts, put on a flat washer, run them through there. I'm going to put a flat washer on this side too, and a nylon lock nut, and just get it hand tight. And I'll do the same thing for our 3 remaining slots there. I could take our assembly, and this side here is going to sit towards the outside of the truck, and this is just going to kind of slide right in like that. And what I did is just push our bag up and put my finger over it to prevent the air from entering, to give me more room to work. But get that roughly lined up, let our bag down, and then what we're going to be able to do, so if you look on the bottom of the bag, there's going to be a threaded hole there. And then on our bracket, there's going to be that beveled hole there as well. And this should line up with the threaded hole in the bag, and we can get our hardware started in there. But first, we'll do this, kind of let it rest in its natural position. Make sure it lines up. We'll mark it. That way we can get this up some and get it tightened down and everything else. So I kind of just eyeballed everything, where the hole lines up, and setting it flat. And what you're trying to do is just essentially get the bag as straight as possible. So try to put some marks there, but more or less I just need to get it as far back towards the back as I can. So you have this short little bolt here that is going to hopefully thread into the bottom of the bag there. And then I'll come back with my Allen key 7/32 and snug it down. From here we can take our carriage bolts, so you're going to have 2 of these. Drop those down. It'll be the same on the other side. And you can take this axle strap and feed that through each carriage bolt. And then just loosely install a flat washer and a nut. We can take our bail clamp here. It's going to go around the leaf spring pack, and you're going to put it through the bottom holes of the bracket on each side, like that. And then, just like all the other hardware, you're going to put on a flat washer and a nylon lock nut. So with all this stuff loosely in place now, what you want to do is you want your plate here to be as low as possible, but you don't want it to actually contact the John's bumper strike plate there. You want a little bit of space there. So just to have a constant, actually just going to take our spacer, one of the leftover spacer blocks, just put that through. And then I'll do that on the other side, the airbag as well, on the passenger side there, just to kind of, you know, make sure it's the same. We have a comfortable gap there and everything's going to work properly. So with that said, now what I'm going to do is come back and just snug up our bolts a little bit. Do these first so it pulls this down flat. And when you're doing the axle strap and the U-bolt or bail bolt and whatnot, you want to tighten them down evenly. That way it kind of just draws everything down the way it should. And a 9/16 on it. That's what all the bolts are. And then I'll do our bail bolt next, holding flat against our leaf spring pack. With the U-bolt and the axle strap all snugged up, then we can come back with the 9/16 socket and wrench and snug up these. So now I went ahead and knocked that little spacer out that we had in between there. And with all the hardware snug, you can make sure to come back with a torque wrench and torque it all down. Now what we can do is hook up our airline. And so when you plug this into the bag, or any fitting for that matter, you want to make sure that you have a good, clean, straight cut. So you can use a tool like this, or even a regular utility knife, or a pair of tubing cutters. You just don't want to use a regular pair of snips, because then it'll kink it and more than likely leak. So it's a good example how it should look: flat, clean, you know, no burrs or trash hanging off the side of it. And this is just going to plug right into the fitting. So it's a push to connect type deal. So you just line that up, it kind of snaps right into place. And I went ahead and just routed our airline too. So when you're doing this, you know, avoid hot moving parts. Thankfully on our Ford here, it's pretty wide open. So just ran it along our frame rail, all the way over to our hitch here, and we'll take a look from the other side in a minute. But there's fittings they give you with a no drill bracket that you can mount your fitting to, and then that line just gets cut to length and plugged right into there. Here's how our fittings are mounted up. So like I said, they give you this bracket, just zip ties to your hitch. There's other ways you can mount up these fittings too. You can check your instructions or some of our other videos, give you some ideas, but this is what I opted for. And you know, so being the driver's side, I set it up on this one, and then I routed our passenger side airline as well, which is this one, and we'll go back underneath the truck and take a look at it. So that airline just runs along our back bumper there, and then pretty much the same deal on this side as it is the driver's side, you know, and goes to our airbag assembly, which I have installed. So this is going to go on essentially the exact same way as the other side. Really, with one exception, you got your heat shield here. So make sure to put that on. You know, you'll bolt up your upper bracket, and then when you go to mount up the airbag, put the put this on, it just lays on there and gets sandwiched in between. The upper bolt for the bracket's a little bit different, but I mean, not a huge deal there. You know, if you got the one side figured out, you can piece together this side and figure it out. And then your airline tube is also going to have a couple of these sleeves. And, you know, before you plug the airline tube into the bag, put these sleeves over it. And these are just a heat shield, essentially, since we're somewhat close to the exhaust. But that's really about it in terms of the differences with this one. So we'll go ahead and inflate our bags to about 70 psi. And then we can check for any leaks. To check for leaks, you can listen. You know, if you hear air hissing out, you know you got an issue. And you can also spray everything down with soapy water, which is what I did. And what you're looking for is for bubbles to rapidly and continuously form. That'll indicate a leak. You know, give it a couple minutes. Sometimes it takes a while. Our case looks like we're in good shape. I don't see anything like that happening. We got some bubbles up there, but they're not building back up, you know, if that makes sense. So I think it's safe to say we're good. If you do have a leak, you know, you could tighten that down if that's where it's coming from a little bit. Tighten it down a little more. But usually it's, you know, have a bad cut on the airline hose if it's leaking up out of there. So you can let the air out of the system, take the hose out, cut it clean again, plug it back in, and try it again until you verify that you don't have any leaks. And from there, went ahead and reinstalled our heat shield. In a minute, when I get this down on the ground, I'll go ahead and get our spare tire put back up in place. But with that said, that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Firestone Ride-Rite air helper springs on our 2015 Ford F-350.